a warm welcome to you all and thank you for joining us today for the launch of the Guidelines International Network Indigenous Communities Working Group, a collaboration between the Guidelines International Network and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. My name is Daniela Carl and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Guidelines International Network, and I'm very pleased to be here with you all today. Before we start, I'd like to welcome Raul from the RNAO to give a short introduction for our Spanish-speaking audience today. Raul, would you like to join?
Yes, thank you. Buenos días a todos. Les damos la bienvenida a este webinar del día de hoy y solamente quiero explicarles en breves palabras que pueden buscar los subtítulos de esta conversación en español. Si ustedes van abajo en Zoom, donde están las 12, que son los subtítulos, hay un menú, hay una flecha pequeñita y ahí dice el lenguaje en el que hablo y lenguaje en el que quiero recibir el subtítulo. Lo voy a poner también aquí en el chat para que ustedes lo vean. Y de esa manera pueden configurar el subtítulo para poder tenerlo en español. Y si tienen alguna pregunta, no tengan por favor ningún problema en preguntarme por el chat y yo les puedo ayudar también. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you, Raul. It is my pleasure now to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Tecumseh and Land, who is knowledge keeper and a board member of the RNAO. Dr. Tecumseh and Land, the stage is yours for your welcome remarks.
Thank you, Daniela. Welcome to all from wherever you are on Mother Earth, joining in with us today. And I am known as, I was introduced, Tecumseh and Land. So I am come from an area of what we call Turtle Island, from an indigenous perspective of North America. And I am Mohawk, which is Ganagahaga in our language, and part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which some of you would know as Iroquois. So I'm going to open our gathering this morning in the way that we do in our traditional ways. Whenever we gather with these kinds of meetings, we open with what we call the words before all words, or the Thanksgiving address. And as we open, we offer this Thanksgiving prayer or words of gratitude to Creator and for all the gifts that we receive that promote our lives to be long and good ones. And so this is the way that we open. The words that I offer and that I share come from many of my teachings and phrases that I've had over 40 years working with our communities, Indigenous communities, or Kanata, as we would call it. And so these are words that have embodied the teachings of a number of our different teachers from different nations. And I share it with you now as a way of bringing our minds together as one. It's a way that we think of how we come together to work collectively, that we bring our minds together. And so this is one of the ways that we are able to do so, is by opening with our words of gratitude or Thanksgiving address. So you're going to see a number of slides that are going to match in some ways with the thoughts and the words that I'll share with you. You will have many other thoughts and words and images that will come to mind, I expect, all of which will bring our minds together as one. As we open, we acknowledge that we're giving thanks to all people and to all our relations. And when we speak of all our relations, we're actually speaking of all of creation, not just humans, but all of creation. And so we give thanks to all as we begin. I also draw our minds together with the recognition, as you will see on this next slide, many faces. And these faces help us to remember that we are of many ways and many differences, but yet all very much the same. And so what we also say when we bring our minds together as one, that we bring our minds together recognizing and focusing on all of what is common that brings us together as one. And the differences we offer with respect and honor, and recognize that the differences bring our minds together in such a way as to help us to see in many different ways. So this is the way we begin as we open our words of gratitude. So in this next slide, you will actually see the beginning of our words. And so as I begin, I offer gratitude to all of creation, to all of you. O bojoma shomas bojono komas wabanoben ese kwekwechkan. I'm grateful and we give thanks for this day. We're grateful for Brother Sun who brings the light to this day so that we can see and appreciate the beauty of all of your creation. We're grateful for the warmth that Brother Sun brings to Mother Earth so that all of creation can grow to the fullest of their potential. We're grateful and we give thanks for the trees and for the plants that guide us, teach us, and nurture us. Next slide, please. And as we see all of creation and we see the beauty of all of creation, we give thanks for the trees and for the plants that guide us, teach us, and nurture us. And we're especially grateful for those trees and plants who've given of their lives in support of our lives so that we might live. We're grateful. Next slide, please. As you see all of the beauty of creation, as it's presented to us, we give thanks for this Creator, that you give us all of this beauty to see and to appreciate. Next slide, please. And as you see all of the gifts that come from creation that feed us and give us nourishment, we give thanks to all of these plants and all of these forms of food that feed us. Next slide, please. So for all of these things, Creator, we're grateful. For those things that come this day through the eastern doorway, we're grateful and we give thanks, especially grateful for those things that continue to provide to us the gifts to help us to wash away the hurts and pains from our physical being so that we might live in peace this day with all of your creation. And we give thanks, Creator, as we gather now and to all of the gifts that come from the southern doorway. We're grateful for the waters, the medicine waters that give life to all of your creation. Next slide, please. We give thanks to all of the finned ones that live within those waters. And we're especially grateful for their gifts, for their teachings. And we give thanks to those who have given of their lives in support of our lives so that we might live. And we're grateful and we give thanks for the healing spirits that come this day through the southern doorway. We're grateful for those who provide to us the gifts to help us to wash away the hurts and pains from our minds so that we might live in peace with all of your creation. Next. And we give thanks now to the healing spirits that come this day through the western doorway. Grateful for Grandmother Moon who rises in the sky and guides us in the cycles of life and death and guides the female side of life in their special work with all of your creation. We're especially grateful, Creator, for the healing spirit that comes through that gift that guides us this day as we, through the gifts of the generations that have preceded us. And we're grateful especially for the cycles of life that are guided by Grandmother Moon. We're grateful and we give thanks, Creator, for the healing spirit that comes this day through the western doorway. We're especially grateful for those who come to us at night in the form of dreams that bring to us the gifts to help us to see more clearly, to hear more clearly, to think more clearly, and to speak more clearly. And we're grateful, Creator, next, for the healing spirits that come through our winged brothers and sisters who guide us, teach us, and nurture us with their gifts. We're especially grateful for those who have given of their lives in support of our lives so that we might live. And we're grateful for those who help us to wipe away the hurts and pains from our hearts so that we might live in peace this day with all of your creation. Next, and we're grateful, Creator, for the healing spirits that come through the northern doorway. We're grateful for the great white spirit-bearer brother and sister who guide us, teach us, and nurture us on our spiritual healing journeys. We're grateful and we give thanks for the four-leggeds. We're especially grateful for the gifts that come from those four-leggeds that continue to support our lives, especially those who have given of their lives in support of our lives so that we might live. Next. And we're especially grateful, Creator, for the healing spirits that come this day through the northern doorway. We're especially grateful for the gifts that help us to endure the most difficult times of our lives, so that we might go through these times and become stronger and better human beings for them. We're grateful, especially, Creator, to Mother Earth for her continued love and care and nurturing of our lives. Despite the disrespect and the harm we've caused her, she continues to love us, care for us, and nurture us. And by doing so, she teaches us the lessons of unconditional love. We're grateful, especially, Creator, next, for the healing spirits that come this day through all of your sky world. We're especially grateful for the great thunder being who brings the waters, the medicine waters, to Mother Earth to heal her, cleanse her, and nurture her so that she can continue to support our lives. Next, and we're grateful, Creator, and give thanks to the four winds that cleanse the air we breathe and bring to us the gifts of the four seasons. Next, and we're grateful, Creator, for all those that come through all your universe, for the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the planets, that they continue to live together in harmony and balance. And by doing so, they teach us the lessons we need to know to live in peace with all of your creation. Next, and we give thanks, Creator, for your continued love and care and nurturing of Mother Earth. You heal her, cleanse her, and nurture her, and provide her with the medicines and the medicine people who continue to help us on our healing journeys. Next, and we're grateful, Creator, that you continue to guide and care for our elders in the latter parts of their days, that they might continue to live in peace and harmony with all of your creation for the remainder of their days. Next, and we're grateful, Creator, that you continue to guide the spirits of our relatives back into the spirit world. And we give thanks and we're grateful for the spirit guide who guides us on our life's journey. For all these things we're grateful, Creator, and we give thanks. We're grateful and we give thanks for this day. And for those things that we have forgotten, we now draw to mind and give thanks for, and say, miigwech now all our relations. Now our minds are as one. Oh. So I'll pass it over to Lyndsay now, who will offer our land acknowledgement. And land acknowledgement is what we also do when we open with the words of gratitude. We also then give thanks and acknowledge the lands that we come from and the lands that our ancestors have been on, and those who were the initial ones who lived upon the lands that we currently live upon. So I'll now pass it over to Lyndsay for that acknowledgement.
Thank you very much, Tecumseh. Today, we gather as people of Earth upon our home that is often referred to as Mother Earth by our Indigenous relatives. As we gather, we bring to our minds our Indigenous ancestors, who from the beginning of time gathered wisdom to sustain all life upon our Mother Earth. Today, we recognize both the lands that our ancestors initially lived upon and the gifts of knowledge that they have left for us to raise up, should we choose to do so. We'll now take a moment to reflect and think about the lands we each reside on and the Indigenous people who have cared for the lands that we are living upon, recognizing that those attending today's webinar are located across the globe.
Thank you, Tecumseh and Lyndsay, for your kind words and introduction and land acknowledgement. As we continue, the next slide, I think, is covering the housekeeping. So as you've seen, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterwards with attendees. Please keep your microphones muted unless you have been invited to speak. For your questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. There's time allocated for questions later on in the session. As this is an international webinar, some of you already left comments in the chat function. Please do use the chat function to share from where in the world you are joining us today. The next slide is on the webinar's objectives, the agenda for today. So we had already the opening remarks and the land acknowledgement. Next, we will share the vision and provide an overview of the new Guidelines International Networks Indigenous Communities Working Group, discuss their objectives and planned activities, and explore opportunities for involvement. Before then, we will have time for questions and discussions. The next slide has our speakers on for today. So we had already Tecumseh at Connors, myself. The third speaker today will be Dr. Doris Grinspun, who's the CEO of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario and founder of the Best Practice Guideline and Best Practice Spotlight Organization Program. Who's also the vice chair of the working group. And then the fourth speaker is Dr. Holly Graham, who's the chair of the GIN Indigenous Communities Working Group and professor at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. The next slide, please. I believe has a short video which we recorded in preparation to this webinar, which we now share with you.
Having some difficulties sharing the video. Rule, if I stop sharing, would you be able to pull up the video and share it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No
And you
problem.
need to put sound, tienes que poner el
Yeah.
ruido, el sonido.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone can see it? Yes? Okay, here we go.
A network
Yes.
committed to promoting evidence-based healthcare through the development and implementation of high-quality guidelines. One of the ways we achieve this is through our working groups, which bring together experts and organizations to collaborate on key topics. And we are especially excited about the launch of the working group on Indigenous communities.
Indigenous peoples all around the world have suffered injustices and have been absolutely obliged many times to comply with the rules of someone else. This is an area that RNAO has been dealing with and addressing both from a policy and from a practice perspective. It is absolutely amazing that GIN Guideline International Network accepted the proposal of RNAO to initiate this important working group.
This work is really extremely important work because up until now, as Indigenous people, we have not really been included in the discussions about healthcare with regards to that healthcare provided to Indigenous peoples globally.
I accepted this and I recognize that I'm one voice, but one voice in terms of a First Nation Cree perspective. And really the goal and the hope is that we capture as many multiple voices of Indigenous peoples globally as part of this work. So we're just looking forward to extending an invitation to you to our upcoming webinar, which will focus on our partnership and the work that we can do together. It will be an excellent opportunity to continue these conversations and to share insights, and we hope you can join us.
Don't miss this opportunity to be part of this meaningful initiative. We look forward to gathering with you and sharing our knowledge with one another.
Thank you very much. Let's continue with our slides, I think. Next slide, please. So who are we? Who's the Guidelines International Network? We are a global network of organizations and individuals who are committed to evidence-based guidance and better health outcomes. At its heart, the Guidelines International Network is dedicated to improving healthcare by supporting the development of high-quality clinical practice guidelines and helping put them into everyday use. We do this by bringing together people from different geographies, different cultural settings, different professions and health systems to learn from one another and work collaboratively. Our vision is straightforward but ambitious: to ensure that health guidelines is trustworthy, health guidelines are trustworthy, accessible, and help improve health outcomes for everyone. Our mission is to lead, strengthen, and support collaboration among the global community involved in developing, adapting, and implementing guidelines. As of today, we have members in 56 countries, and we are creating a space to share knowledge, experience, and diverse perspectives from around the world. It is this global network and shared commitment that makes initiatives like this working group both possible and impactful. Next slide, please. So GIN is truly global, and one of our strengths is how we bring people together in different ways. We support collaboration through 7 regional communities, including North America, Africa, Asia, and Australia, New Zealand. These communities create space for regional dialogue, shared challenges, and local leadership. In addition to the regional communities, we also have currently 18 topic-specific working groups, each focused on a particular area of practice or methodology, and these groups are active, collaborative, and open to engagement from across the community. The Indigenous Communities Working Group will become part of this wider network, connected globally, while remaining focused on its unique purpose and priorities. It is the combination of global connection and focused collaboration that allows our working groups to have real impact. Next slide, please. The Indigenous Working Group, GIN is very pleased to be working in partnership with the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario on this important initiative. And the working group reflects GIN's commitment to improving healthcare through collaboration that is respectful, inclusive, and grounded in lived experience. Through this partnership, we aim to support the development of guidance that is culturally grounded, methodologically robust, and genuinely meaningful in real-world settings and will have a lasting impact. The Indigenous Communities Working Group speaks to, if the Indigenous Communities Working Group speaks to you, please do get involved, as we aim to bring communities together. In addition to networks or organizations that work in healthcare or health research settings working with Indigenous communities, please do also get in touch. We can make a difference here. This is a genuinely exciting moment for the Guidelines International Network, and we are very much looking forward to today's webinar and the launch of this new working group. I would like to thank everyone who has helped to bring us to this point today. Thank you. The next slide, I think, is then Doris. Yes, I shall now invite Dr. Doris Grinspun, the CEO of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, to introduce the RNAO. Doris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela, to you and Guideline International Development for giving the space to this important conversation and work. And Nyao Tecumseh for your ongoing teachings. tremendous. And Jimmy Witch to Holly for accepting the challenge, which will, I believe, add to the well-being of Indigenous peoples all over the world. I do want to welcome Veronica Mamani from Bolivia that lives now in Chile, because you more or less wrote to me every other day, when it's happening, when it's happening, when it's happening. And I also want to say thank you to Earl. I did put in the chat your conversations years ago, left long, long-lasting teachings for me. So thank you. I wanted to say a special thank you. And to people all over the world. I see people from Cameroon, people from UK, people from various places. Welcome to everybody. You all will add to the conversations. So thank you, Chimigwich, to all of you. Next slide, please. I want to share what's the work of RNAO in general, because it's important that you understand it is the Professional Association for Nurses in Ontario, the largest jurisdiction in Canada. And our role is dual, is healthy public policy, and it's also evidence-based practice, and hence the work of the guidelines that Daniela was mentioning before. So it is critical that you understand that we intertwine, much like the roots of a tree, intertwine both to hopefully make a significant impact here in Ontario and all over the world, because the guidelines are used everywhere. So the impact of developing developing methodologies for guidelines that are driven by Indigenous peoples all over the world, that Holly will be leading, also is critical, because we have a network of 1,500 best spotlight organizations. So next slide, please. I want to tell you a bit about the program. The program at RNAO has 3 key buckets or pillars, or roots of trees, I think, as Tecumseh probably would say. And those roots of trees are intertwined because it's an integrated model. So the top one is if you can point to it, Lyndsay, the top one is the guideline development, which Lyndsay actually is very involved in guiding, and others at RNAO. The one on the left is the guideline implementation or knowledge mobilization, and it has several components, and that's where the 1,500 evidence best practice spotlight organizations sit. And then the right one is evaluation. And I will not dare speak about evaluation, Daniela, today, because if we think that developing methodologies for development of guidelines is a challenge, and an important challenge in working with Indigenous peoples, you need to understand that evaluation is even more, because often evaluation is again imposed on Indigenous peoples, imposed from a wrong framework, and worse even, sometimes the knowledge of Indigenous people is stolen, not only in guidelines, but in other areas of life too. So that's a future challenge for us to tackle. Today, we're really focusing on the top bucket that Lyndsay is showing, because that is the methodologies to develop guidelines that are driven by a 2I Think approach, that are driven by what Indigenous peoples need, not by what the rest of us that are not Indigenous and can never understand enough will be able to do. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. I want to speak for a second about the in-focus group, and why is it that we uptake the area of Indigenous people's guidelines development to start with. So there are 3 equity-deserving communities that RNAO is very, very focused, and you can put them under the theme of justice for people. So the 3 communities of RNAO and health equity are the 2S LGBTQ plus community, which was the first group that approached RNAO over 20 years ago. The second is the Indigenous health people and trying to advance Indigenous health for people. And the third is the Black health community. And within each one of those, you will see work related to policy, as well as working related to guideline development. In fact, we just issue under the leadership of Dr. Leron Nelson and Dr. Bukola Salami, as well as Stephanie Buchanan and Lyndsay, who just gave us the beautiful land acknowledgement. We issued the guideline that is addressing anti-Black racism against nurses guideline that was issued last week. So here we are taking a step back. We do have a guideline that is Indigenous driven years ago, and I would say we didn't know enough at all of the methodology, how to develop. We had many conversations, and so we are a bit stepping away, a bit back seat to really learn better how to do, how to work with guidelines with Indigenous people. And equally important is the fact that we are developing a guideline again under the leadership of Dr. Holly Graham, who will speak soon, as well as Greta, a fantastic community member. Next slide, please. In the focus group, in focus, meaning all the work that we do. If you go to our website in the in focus, you will see that not only we are working on guidelines with Indigenous peoples, we are also working with the nurses that work with Indigenous peoples. And this is actually the interest group of the Indigenous Nurses and Allies interest group. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. Thank you. And all in all at RNAO, we have developed over 50 guidelines. And then we have developed tools for guideline implementation, for knowledge mobilization. And again, that will be an area that at some point we may do an adjacent webinar with our colleague Maxine Lesage, and that will explain how she, with a group of people, including many of the members that are here that I will talk in a few minutes, develop a toolkit that is specific for the Indigenous best practice spotlight organizations, driven by ceremony and driven by the ways of knowing, being, and doing of Indigenous people, as opposed to the Western eye of seeing. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. Thank you. So the new guideline coming that I said that Dr. Holly Graham is guiding us with her colleague Rita, and with the panel that is 100% Indigenous peoples, is promoting, sorry, that was the first guideline, the promoting smoking reduction and cessation with Indigenous peoples of reproductive age and their communities is the guideline that I spoke, that we did years ago, where we, yes, had a 100% Indigenous panel, yet we didn't know much of the methodology, and I would suggest we still don't know much of the methodology. We're trying to get better with Dr. Holly Graham and the team, but that's where we were then. And what we are doing now with Dr. Graham is titled, for now, the working title is Promoting Life and Prevention of Indigenous Youth Suicide. That's the working title. And I do want to say that it has been an incredible journey of understanding for those of us that develop guidelines. The lived and living challenges of Indigenous peoples in relationship to the suffering and the ability to conjugate suffering and joy together. And I think people like Holly and like Tecumseh and others, Maxine and others, deserve a a monument, because when we spend time with the best practice spotlight organizations, which we have 11 of them, we realize that every single day you experience suicide in the community, and and every single day you are struggling with helping youth to live with the suffering and the challenges of colonialism and the ramifications that that has in their lives. And so when we first understood and worked with the best practice spotlight organizations in Thunder Bay, they told us the age to start to speak about promoting life and prevention of indigenous youth suicide is age 4. And then now we are working from prenatal. So you can just imagine, for people that don't live the realities of colonialism of indigenous people, the tremendous injustice that we have imposed with colonialism and the tremendous suffering that is causing, not in the past, also today. This is why we now say lived experiences and living experiences, both. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. Thank you. I want to share with you that we have, as I said, more than 1,500 best practice spotlight organizations, with 18 that are host spotlight organizations, meaning 18 countries are running their own program using our guidelines and using the materials of RNAO, the implementation science, the knowledge mobilization materials, the training, all free of charge. We do not charge. RNAO doesn't charge at all, not for the guidelines, not for the implementation tool. And Lyndsay or someone, if you can put the link to the Leading Change Toolkit, that will be good. All of that is in our website. All of that is free of charge for you to benefit from that. And on that, I do need to thank the government of Ontario, that has been very generous in funding this program for Ontario, and we can provide free of charge to others. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. So the RNAO Indigenous Focus Best Practice Spotlight Organization goal when we began, and Grace Suba, Kate Hanson, and Tanya Costa are here today. They really are the queens of leading this initiative, alongside with Maxine Lesage, with my colleague Michael, and many others that are leading in different organizations. The goal is to review the Indigenous Focus BPSO program to ensure that it is grounded in Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and focus on Indigenous peoples, family, and community without dictating our Western ways of knowing, being, and doing, but respecting and upholding to the co-creation priority enhancements to the program, including an Indigenous champion focus curriculum that I did mention, Maxine Lesage, that was the main lead person with the group of all. Next slide, please, Lyndsay. That was the creator of the BPSO leading change to IC approach leading change toolkit, alongside with all of the Indigenous best practice spotlight organizations, which are all over the province of Ontario, and supported by our team at RNAO, with tremendous success for them, and I would say tremendous inspiration and learnings for all of us at RNAO. The next slide, please, Lyndsay. Thank you very much. I do want to leave you with the symposium where I said that first we uncovered when we did the focus group that it was age 4 that they wanted us to start for the life promotion, suicide prevention, BPG, and now is prenatal. And that's the work that Dr. Holly Graham is leading, tremendously inspirational. She and Dr. Holly and Greta are inspirational beyond belief. And then I also want to show you what we did in Thunder Bay. You can see the artwork. And that's something that I wish, Daniela, we were in person with this 70 people group, because you would be doing artwork as we are talking. And I cannot begin to tell you, as a person that just learned about that with Indigenous people, how soothing to the heart and to the soul it is that as people are doing panels or people are doing presentations, we are doing artwork in different types of artwork. This was a quilt that Tania Costa had the pleasure then of putting together, but each one of us were doing a piece of that quilt as people were presenting. Sometimes very painful experiences, sometimes very happy experiences. As I said before, I don't know anyone that knows better how to conjugate, the same as you conjugate verbs in school, but this is conjugating life. The pains, the suffering, the injustices that colonization has done forever and continues to do, alongside with the joys of knowing, as Tecumseh spoke so beautifully at the beginning, knowing how to lead life and how to live long lives in a good way. This is something I absolutely learned from Tecumseh, living long, good lives in a good way. And so now Tecumseh again, chimigwich to all of you, and I will pass it on to Dr. Holly Graham on the next slide. And she is another amazingly brilliant person that I am learning also huge amounts from, as well as Greta and the entire panel of the guideline that we are doing. And now she will be leading the Indigenous Communities Working Group with a Guideline International Development. So again, thank you to Daniela and the entire Guideline International team. On to you, Dr. Holly Graham.
Thank you, Dr. Doris Grinspun, for that kind of overview, which leads into what I want to talk about. Danse Guatawao Gakyo, Neoma Neho Isquo Ojipe Suawasis, Neowao Wiowen Omao Ogamao Dixquo, Neomao Wiowao Oma Holly Graham. So I just welcomed everyone. I told you I'm from Thunachal First Nation, which is a community in Saskatchewan, Canada. And I shared my Cree name, Okimao Tixquo, which loosely translated means to bring peace and happiness to those around you. And then I said my English name, which is Holly. So I'm very excited as we are coming together today for one of our first meetings as we talk about Indigenous health. And I just wanted to start with saying health is wealth. It's something I've heard from the time I was a little girl, and my brother, who still lives in our community in Thunachal, Beasuwasis, always says, sis, health is wealth. And when we look at the health disparities between Indigenous peoples worldwide and the non-Indigenous peoples in those respective communities, Indigenous peoples are not enjoying the same level of health. And that has roots in colonization. And the colonial experience has been, there are the unique stories in each country, but there are similar themes and threads that have evolved as a result of colonization. I'm speaking from the experience specifically from my community. My mother and her family attended residential schools. So I was born into Indigenous health and grew up experiencing many of those disparities. And so when we look at the concept of health is wealth, and we look in Canada, next slide, please, we've been very fortunate that there has been acknowledgement of the impact of colonization. Our government has apologized for residential schools. And more recently, even though it's 10 years ago already since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada released a report which contained 94 calls to action, there's been this growing awareness of the impact of colonization and the fact that it's not over in terms of how it continues to impact health and wealth. When we look at the history specifically from a Canadian perspective, of course, we know there's the epidemics. We know that the Indian Act, which was in 1876, was the law that actually enforced annihilation from our culture. and really supported the genocide of our peoples and our culture, our ways of being. We had the residential schools, the Indian hospitals, and when we look at health, that is very foundational when we look at how we have, as Canadians, inherited this history, along with the challenges, primarily mistrust being one of them. We've also had the 60s scoops, and there are many who say when we look at current children in child and family services and welfare, that we have more children now within these services than we had who attended residential schools. When we look to our justice, our correctional systems as well. So the health and wealth of Indigenous peoples really has never recovered from colonization. And when we look at moving forward and how do we start addressing this history, in Canada, we have the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action, and it actually specified 94 specific calls, but they also focused on ways that we could forge better pathways and better relationships looking at child welfare, language and culture, education, and justice. So the important part is our truths are different in every country where colonization has occurred. And when we look at reconciliation, that will also involve different processes and different pathways. It has not been achieved, so there's no blueprint out there that we can magically follow. But the hope for this group together, as we work together, is that we can actually forge healing pathways, as we go forward. Next slide, please. So the objective when we look on our mission and what we want to accomplish is we want to look at authentic ways of engaging Indigenous peoples globally. How can they be a part of developing guidelines that will impact their health? And not just a one-time, but an ongoing way of engaging and ensuring that these processes are, I don't want to say adhered to, but that they're available, in that we have the will globally to actually engage with our Indigenous peoples respectively in each country, recognizing this history and recognizing that their voices are really what need to be the focus and uplifted. So it's really about co-creating in a collaborative way these methodologies. Just how do we engage? How do we work together? How do we evaluate our work together? That it honors traditional teachings and ways and knowing worldviews. And most importantly, the goal is looking at health for everyone. And we really have to look at how do we mitigate, the health inequalities and successfully integrate cultural safety. What does that mean? What does that concretely mean, like the praxis, the application? So objectives, we want to create this international networker of all these Indigenous peoples, the researchers, the knowledge keepers, the Gaideak, and people who actually develop these guidelines and create these relationships. And importantly, acknowledging Indigenous sovereignty, that it's critical that Indigenous peoples lead these discussions and are a part of creating these methodologies that works for them and their communities, and also evaluating, how well are they working. As part of this, there's different models and there's different frameworks, I think, worldwide and globally, when we look at how do we start changing how we see, how do we arrange epistemology, how do we stretch epistemology, how do we start making room for other knowledge systems? And so in Canada, one of our elders, he's Mi'kmaq from the East Coast, Elder Marshall, he has shared and developed and is furthering developing the concept of two-eyed seeing. And that's just looking at how do we combine these two knowledge systems, looking at a Western, what's the evidence science? Like, how can we benefit from the science and the knowledge that we have come to know makes a difference? And then the other side is how do we integrate and bring in the knowledge of the wise ones, the people who've been here since immemorial. And so that's one approach. But this is what we're interested in learning with this working group, is what works in your country and how do you see these systems coming together to create better health and wellness. And part of this, of course, would be looking at some educational resources, ways of sharing and disseminating the information, which would include typical webinars and publications, and hopefully some types of toolkits. But this would all be developed within this working group as to guiding what would be appropriate. We look at knowledge mobilization. That is different, and it works different in different places. As a foundation, it's about respecting culture, which is our worldviews, and of course, looking at racism and discrimination. When we look at that racism is certainly a barrier, and it is a form of violence, and it is a part, if we want to address health inequalities, that we have to start looking at what type of care are Indigenous relatives receiving when they access care. And next slide, please. And I do want to say that those objectives that we shared, that's a draft. If we decide as a working group that we want to add to it, we are certainly able to do that. This is just a primary foundation to let you know the direction and how we hope to integrate and be flexible to everyone's perspectives. And some of these concepts I've already covered as to why it matters. This history of colonization, and we look at beliefs that were started right with colonization, starting with the doctrine of discovery, which essentially, if you were not Christian, you were not recognized as human. So when we look at how peoples have been treated globally and Indigenous not being recognized to be entitled to human rights, we look at what can we do now, and the primary foundation is we have to acknowledge Indigenous health sovereignty and Indigenous rights and understand how this history has impacted. So it matters if we want to make a difference to reduce these health disparities. It also matters because it's critical that we preserve and that we sustain these Indigenous health knowledge systems. That's part of health and wellness. We know that language preservation is key and foundation. It's key cornerstone of culture. When I think of, I am not a fluent Cree speaker. I understand basic conversation. My mother was a fluent Cree speaker. But for example, when you look at the language, Bimalte, it means walk. Loosely translated. And walk in English is just a verb. It means to walk. There's no other meaning behind that but walk. But in the Cree word, bimalte, and that is a shortened version of walk, it's walk with your heart. Te is heart. So when you walk with your heart, you walk differently than just walking. And that's just like a tidbit. That's just such a minor part of how the Indigenous languages are structured differently and have the teachings of how to treat ourselves, how to treat others when relationship, and how we create harmony with Mother Earth as well. And ultimately, that's the knowledge that has not had a chance to be shared or disseminated. And that's a really critical part, I believe, of this group. Also, it matters because Jin is a leader in the world in what they do, and it will strengthen their capacity to share these guidelines globally to ensure that more groups of people, more countries have access to whatever it is we develop together to actually look at these disparities. So that was just a brief kind of introduction, an overview as to some of our hopes, and these can certainly be expanded and added on in whichever direction that this Indigenous working group decides to go.
So the Guidelines International Networks working groups, as I said, we have 18 at the moment. To be a member of the working group, you need to be a current member of GIN, but there are different options here. So for example, if you are a representative of an Indigenous community and not yet a Guidelines International member, then please use the QR code that's on the slide to reach the application form for this working group. Both organizations, the Guidelines International Network and the RNAO, have agreed match funding to provide to cover fees for representatives of Indigenous communities. please use the QR code if this applies to you. If you are already a member of the Guidelines International Network, please get in touch, and you want to join this working group, please get in touch with our membership manager, Joanne Georgeson, by email. The email is on the slide. Yes, there it is. And then if you are not a representative of an Indigenous community or a current GIN member, then you can apply for joining GIN as an individual or organizational member via our website or by emailing to Joanne as well. The website and Joanne's email address are on the slide. The next slide, please. Is that me or is that Holly? I'm not sure. I'm happy to do that.
It's you, Daniela.
I just do it. Let me just do it. Okay, so what's the commitment needed from you if you want to join the working group as a member? So we are planning to have online meetings quite regularly throughout the year, and the frequency is depending on the objectives and the agreed activities. The first working group meeting is taking place on the 20th of May. Canadian time, early in the morning. Further to the east, where we are in Europe, it's in the afternoon. We will share information on this in due course. During that first meeting, we will discuss priorities and agree on future meeting dates. Yeah, we will share details on this with members of the working group later on. I think this is now my cue to hand over to Dr. Graham, I believe.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. Dr. Graham, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniela. And I apologize. I forgot to, and I meant to thank Tecumseh for that wonderful opening and the prayer that set everything off in a really good way, and to remind us about our relationships and our connections to all of Mother Earth. So Tecumseh, I sorry I missed that, but thank you for opening in such a beautiful way. Next slide, please. When we look at creating this Indigenous Communities Work Group, we're really looking for diversity in terms of people with different backgrounds and expertise. So we really want to be, of course, respectful of Indigenous worldviews and sovereignty. And so we really are hoping and want to highlight, could we have knowledge keepers, the Gaitea come and join us, and the elders. We really, really invite community members. We're looking for the lived experience, people who are experiencing many of the disparities that have been briefly mentioned here. And of course, we need people who have done research in this area and people who have the expertise with developing guidelines to all be a part of this, to collaboratively work with creating this guideline of how we want to engage and how we want to provide that foundation for people who don't know how to do this work and want to start working with Indigenous peoples globally, but also to create a format where Indigenous peoples will be included in the development of any policies that impact their health. And we also want to encourage people, anyone who works with Indigenous communities in healthcare or in health research settings who has that background. There will be an all-Indigenous steering committee to make sure that decisions really do reflect, prioritize, and focus on the voices and the priorities of Indigenous communities. As part of participating, we will ask that individuals complete a brief form that really outlines their relevant experience and how this experience would be relevant and contribute to this working group as a whole. You can talk about lived experience, you could talk about, your work experience, and perhaps in research, or looking at any part of guideline development or knowledge of traditional knowledge systems as well. Next slide, please. So this is where we're going to actually be using Mentimeter, and I think Raul is going to be working with and assisting this process. And we really want to have this latter part of this webinar to focus and give the opportunity on hearing some of your responses and your thoughts and also your wisdom as we move forward collectively with establishing this Indigenous Communities Working Group. Raul, do you want to explain to them Mentimeter? And they probably need the code for it so they can participate. I do want to say, if you're not comfortable with Mentimeter, of course, you always have the chat box as an option, and we welcome your thoughts and responses to any of the questions or comments in the chat box as well.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Graham. Do you mind please sharing again the list of questions for everyone to see? As we discussed yesterday, we are going to receive all this feedback through the chat box, and it would be for us a very insightful thing that you could write your thoughts on these kind of questions that we have in here, and we can collect them then afterwards for everyone to share.
Okay.
So the question there will be, if you can please, so the questions in here, I will be sharing them in Spanish also. La voy a compartir en español también para las personas y vamos a estar copiando cada una de sus respuestas también para poder después compartirla de forma global en unos momentos más. So the questions in here, yes?
I'm just wondering, Raul, if I should just say the question in English and you can translate, and then we can have some discussion.
That's a great idea. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So one thing we'd like to start with is if you could just please share with us any additional ways that you think we could and we should promote this working group. You can start putting that in the chat box, and Raul's going to translate this.
Entonces les pedimos que por favor puedan compartir maneras de poder promover este grupo de trabajo que puedan ser útiles, digamos, para todos.
And for some of you may be writing in the chat box, and some of you may be more comfortable just raising your hand and verbally sharing, telling your ideas. You're also welcome to do that. I'm seeing in the chat box social media, email surveys with input, open to anyone for feedback, reaching out to health organizations who serve Indigenous populations. Thank you for those suggestions.
So that means, if I may, Holly, Anu, if you can do a tweet in English, and Raul, if you can do a tweet in Spanish, and also to put it in LinkedIn with the link of how to join the group this time, right? So with the video perhaps, or the link to today's webinar later on, and then also the link to how to join, because now they need to know how to join the working group. Thank you.
I'll just let Raul translate, and then we'll go. Jordi has a comment to make.
Yo voy a traducir esa parte.
Yep.
I will translate,
Yep.
Raúl. Me siento más confortable.
Yep.
Estábamos diciendo, y esto va para Verita y otros que hablan español, que por favor ahora le conviden a todos los amigos, colegas que conocen, que están interesados en trabajar en desarrollo de metodologías para guías de comunidades indígenas, que por favor les conviden en la media social. Ustedes usan en Chile y en Perú mucho LinkedIn, póngalo por favor, que lo pongan en emails, que les pongan que les digan por palabra, y nosotros vamos a mandar también mensaje a través de la media social de cómo registrarse, pero ya les dimos a ustedes el link de cómo registrarte. Raúl, lo pueden poner de nuevo, y entonces por favor regístrense, yo también lo voy a poner, así que convídenla a todos por favor, y ustedes mismos que Verita, yo sé que tú estabas muy interesada, por favor regístrate, te lo mandé en tu WhatsApp ya hoy día. Back to you, Holly.
Thank you, Dr. Grinspun. We have a comment from Jordi.
Thank you, Holly. Muchas gracias. The comment that I would like to make is that there is Indigenous communities all around the world, and I think that, the reason I didn't put it in the chat because it's kind of complicated, so I think it's better if I just explain it, and we will save time to everybody. So I think that there are different ways of how we work with indigenous communities in different parts of the world. It's different how we do it in Africa, and it's different how we do it in Australia. It's different how we do it in Latin America. It's different how we do it in Africa. And I think it could be useful first to try to reach what are the people working on these areas of the world already in GIN, and see if they have people that they have worked with already on the development of guidelines within these indigenous groups in different parts of the world, and then try to make these direct links with the working groups and ensure that all these perspectives, these different ways of knowing, these different ways of working are at least acknowledged inside the working group. And that could be an interesting contribution, I think, for the work that could be done by this working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jordi. And I think that that's an excellent, that GIN contacts all their previous contacts and people they have worked with, and in terms of Indigenous peoples and populations. Thank you for that.
And Jordi, por favor, toma el liderazgo de mandarlo a toda la gente que tú conoces. I was saying Holly because he speaks Spanish also, that he also should send. Obviously, Jordi works, it seems, with the indigenous communities. Will be wonderful that also you, meaning Jordi, disseminates this as much as possible, because you're right, everybody works in a different way in different countries.
Con placer, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really interested in the discussions. It's Alan Enes from Ibis Africa, Cameroon. I would like to suggest one other way, which is on storytelling. You remember, storytelling is something that is universally recognized and it is engaging. Maybe we could start with a story by telling a story about this working group and what we do. It could equally be a story that will tell people about the type of communities that we are working with and what we do on regular work package meetings. A story equally which may be in form of a podcast, which may be hosted in a GIN website, will probably be ideal and good. At eBase Africa, we do a lot of indigenous storytelling and for knowledge dissemination and knowledge extraction in the community and evidence and synthesis. We do a lot of storytelling. So I'm proposing already that we could include storytelling in the aspect of what we do. It could be in form of performance, podcast, whatever the written form that would disseminate or tell the general community as large what we do together. Thank you so much, and over.
Thank you. And that in itself is one of our methodologies, oration, right? When we look at Indigenous communities as we tell stories. So thank you. It just goes back to another way to promote, knowledge mobilization is to use some of our traditional ways of sharing oration. So thank you for that idea.
Only if I may add, just to clarify for people in English and Spanish, the fact that you joined today does not yet include you in the working group. So those of you that are now with the appetite full and want to join the working group, I just put the link again. Please join the working group. Don't assume that because you came today to the webinar, because in the webinar we had 80 people only. Imagine a working group of 80. So please, regístrense si quieren estar en el working group. Ahí puse el link que vinieron hoy día a escuchar. No los ponen en el working group. Register. The sooner the better. Thank you.
That's a very good point, Dr. Grinspun, is like, if you're interested and you've attended this webinar, please follow the link to join the working group. Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if Dr. Grinspun, you want to translate some of the comments in the chat box into Spanish before we move on to the next question, if there's no more comments.
Raúl, ¿quieres traducir del doctor? I don't want to take Raúl's job. I don't want to take
No, don't worry.
Raúl's job.
So the idea is to translate to Spanish some of the suggestions. That's the idea? Yeah, of course. So, Shelly LeBlanc dice que se puede usar...
Lo que dijo el doctor Cameron, el doctor de Camerún, porque yo ya traducí del señor Pardo.
Del anterior. Perdón, Doris, que estaba copiando otro para un tweet ahora, así que no le pude tomar
digo
atención.
yo.
Si lo puede resumir, ya, por favor.
No hay problema. With my pleasure. Entonces, lo que decía el doctor de Camerún es que en cada lugar hay distintos modos de incluso empezar un meeting. de las ceremonias que se hacen y el arte que se usa, etcétera. Así que muy importante que también se refería el señor Pardo, ante el doctor Pardo, que compartamos todos. Y después lo que yo agregué es que aquí hay gente que sabe mucho, muchos, no solo los que están hablando hoy día en los paneles, pero los que todos están participando. Por favor, regístrense, no asuman, ahí pusimos el link, no asuman que ya están en el grupo, tienen que registrarse, ahí está el link y compartir con gente que ustedes creen que va a beneficiar este working group. Gracias. Y también, por supuesto, el colega dijo que ojalá Jean también comparta con otros. Quiero clarificar en nombre de Jean que este es el primer working group de Indigenous Working Group que tiene Jean. Así que para ellos también es una gran experiencia como lo es para el resto de nosotros. Así que regístrense y vengan a compartir. Gracias. Back to you, Holly.
Thank you, Dr. Grinspun. Thank you for those of you who've shared your comments in the chat box. Greatly appreciated. We will be keeping all this information. And thank you to those of you who shared verbally your suggestions and your ideas. Greatly appreciated. The second question, we'd like to gather some of your initial response and some of your feedback is, what do you really think about the draft objectives? And is there anything you feel that's missing? This question goes together. And I'm not sure, maybe Lyndsay, if you could pull up the draft objectives right now so that everyone could see that. Thank you. So in the chat box, feel free to put your comments in there, and also feel free to share your comments verbally with us when you look at our key objectives. What do you think about it? What do you think is missing? Just some initial feedback would be appreciated. And I'm not seeing any hands raised yet.
La siguiente pregunta entonces es poder compartir la respuesta inicial o las primeras impresiones a estos objetivos que fueron escritos acá y si hay algo que ustedes piensan que falta en estos objetivos, por favor. Si lo pueden comentar acá en el chat o pueden querer levantar la mano, por favor, tienen el tiempo de hacerlo.
And Holly, seeing that there are no hands, this we can bring back on May 20. It is. At the end we need to put that date again so people know. Here there is more. There is so as much as I appreciate the two I think approach, there are more than two worldviews. So that may be, it's skipping my eyes, maybe a suggested addition for an international approach. Beautiful. So that's a Shailene LeBlanc. Amazing comment. Thank you, Holly. That's important. That's important. We will capture that. We will capture all these views. So we should add maybe our says to I think and other world view approaches, maybe, Holly.
Yes, and I think that will be one of the tasks, so to speak, is to look at other worldviews and other ways of integrating knowledge systems. It was just one example that has been brought forth in Canada, and I agree there are other ways. And certainly when we look at an international approach, I think we'd probably have a list of possible ways to do this, and whatever works for that community is what they would use. But I appreciate that, Shailene. Thank you for sharing that. And if you know of anyone participants in this webinar right now, please feel free to put them in the chat box so that I can and we can become more familiar with them. Jordy has a comment. He says, things that could be potentially missing, link with other GIN working groups to harmonize approaches, to represent different approaches from around the world. Yes. Yes, thank you, Jody. And that really is what our goal is. And so part of our challenge will be writing it in a way that it reflects that in terms of we want to acknowledge and honor Indigenous people's perspectives and approaches and understand
Holly,
that they're unique every part of the world.
sorry, Dr. Graham, we have here Joanne from Jean, and Joanne, I believe, oversees working groups. Maybe, Joanne, you want to make a comment on how you would connect between one working group and another, because I think this is a fantastic perspective that a participant put there. I think I had seen Joanne, but maybe
I'm happy to answer this if that's helpful.
fantastic,
Joanne is not
fantastic.
there.
Thank you.
Yes, so as I said, we have currently 18 working groups, and what we're going to do going forward, we will introduce new working groups within the community, but also the wider community via short videos and blogs and articles. And during our annual conference, we also facilitate networking, but we will use our platform Gin Connect to raise awareness about the different working groups and bring people together in person. That's mainly done at the annual conference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniela, for giving that explanation. I'm not sure, Raul, you want to translate that?
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Raúl.
Yes.
Do you want me
De lo
to?
que, please, Doris, I'm preparing this tweet right now that we're going to share.
No worries. You do the tweet, you do that fantastic, and I do this. So, lo que Daniela, la CEO de GIN, de Guideline International Network, explicaba es que hay 18 grupos de trabajo. Este es el primer grupo indígena, y decía que van a compartir a través de vídeos, a través del website de GIN, etcétera, los diferentes working groups. Eso satisface a la pregunta a la comentario de la persona. I'm asking also Dr. Graham if that answered the question, or if the person that put the comment has additional questions on that topic. I think it's good to go.
Thank you. Leona has a comment. Anti-racism and discrimination training. There are more policies within hospitals that are being developed and updated with this title. Could be an option, and wording depends on the region. Thank you for that. I have written a guide. It's called CPR Racism Guide, and it is an intervention guide to address when you're actively witnessing racism in the moment. I am a nurse as well. So you're right, Leona, like those are concepts when we look at health disparities that are, and more calls to acknowledge racism as a determinant of health. We see that in the literature growing. Yes, thank you for that, Leona. I don't know if you want to translate that, Raul, just what Leona shared in the chat box.
Of course, yes. So Leona here. Sorry, the one that shared Lily Blanc.
The one by
Leona,
Leona.
yes. So, lo que Leona explica es que el entrenamiento en contra del racismo y antidiscriminación, que hay más políticas dentro de los hospitales que están siendo desarrolladas hoy en día y que se están siendo actualizadas también bajo este título, lo cual es una opción dependiendo de las palabras que se usan en diferentes regiones, pero son todas parecidas. Es el tema de antirracismo o antidiscriminación. No sé, doctora Grinspun, si tiene algo usted que comentar respecto a este comentario o que quiera mencionar.
Yo comentar que la doctora Graham dijo que ella hizo un policy porque trabaja mucho en este tema, y que se llama CPR, como lo que hacemos a las personas cardiovascular que necesitan el paro cardíaco, sobre racismo. Holly, Dr. Graham, you think you can put in the chat the link to the tool that you developed? I was explaining about it.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will. Shaylin, has a comment. One of the things I appreciate most about our work implementing guidelines within our organization is the collaborative approach of blending, weaving guideline recommendations with community input. So adding a point to highlight collaboration, maybe. Yes, definitely. That could be a part of the mission, absolutely. That language we use is so important to capture the spirit of how we're moving forward and doing this together. So any words you have to assist with that are greatly appreciated.
If we are capturing words, Dr. Graham, on the third one, explore and apply methodologies such as to, I think, approach and other worldviews. I think it's the previous one that the participant asked. I think that way we are completing this, and then on May 20, we will be further ahead. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that rich discussion and for your careful attention to detail to make sure that the language surrounding this initiative is very inclusive and that clearly defines how these relationships are going to be, that they're truly collaborative, co-creation, and that that's part of the methodology is how we're engaging in the language up front, which I think is part why we wanted to get your input from this initial webinar and leave so much time, because it's so important to have that opportunity for that. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for putting that into the thing. I'm actually going to share the actual website in which you can find, and it's under resources, and I'll pop that in there into the chat box as well, and you'll find the CPR racism guide in there. So thank you for that. I think if there's no more discussion in this web link, when you go to Nursing and Reconciliation, you can actually just scroll down and you'll see the CPR racism guide, you'll see the educational video of how to use it, you'll see the evaluation form, and also the publication that goes with it. So thank you for that. When we look at, I guess, our third question is, what we really want to have is meaningful inclusion of Indigenous knowledge systems and worldviews. And we just wanted some initial feedback, like what would that look like to you? And what do you think would be important to capture? And I do recognize that we have our own teachings in terms of spiritual teachings, that much of our knowledge is spiritually based, and that there are clear lines of what is to be shared in a public domain, so to speak, versus what stays in community or stays in ceremony. But we'd be very interested in hearing some of your perspectives in response to inclusion of Indigenous knowledge systems and worldviews. And I think it's been put into the chat box. I'm not sure, Raul, if you'd like to translate that question.
Yes, and we just put it in the chat too. ¿Cómo se ve para ti o para ustedes una inclusión significativa del conocimiento y las cosmovisiones indígenas en el desarrollo de guías que se está buscando?
Thank you, Raul. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so if your hand is raised, please feel free to share your perspective or thoughts.
Glenda has a comment.
Yes, I just saw
Indigenous
that.
lived experience, clinicians and researchers who work in this field.
Yes, thank you. And I think that speaks to how important it is in terms of who participates in this Indigenous working group. And we're hoping to get people with those backgrounds so that they can meaningfully guide, what it is we put into these guidelines. So we definitely need Indigenous lived experience, also clinicians, and there are clinicians with lived experience as well, and researchers who work in this area. So thank you, Glenda, for pointing us back to the importance of that.
Talking about wording, Dr. Graham, and that I just uptake from a member of RNAO that commented on that when we released the guideline on addressing anti-Black racism in nursing. And this colleague said, it's not lived experience, it is lived and living experiences because we are still living them. So I think that that's very important, and maybe we want to also think for the Indigenous Working Group to speak about lived and living because, yeah, I
That's so true. That health disparities are here, and we're still living with the impacts of colonization. Like colonization has not stopped. Yes.
I will translate. Lo que decía yo es que aprendí de una colega el otro día cuando sacamos la guía sobre trabajar el racismo espantoso que hay con las enfermeras negras y tratar de terminar esa injusticia, que nosotros hablamos de gente con experiencias vividas y la colega dijo, son gente con las personas vividas y viviendo, porque no se ha terminado todavía. Así que le decía yo a la doctor Graham que este podía ser otro wording agregado que hay que hacer, lived and living experiences. Thank you, I translated already.
Thank you. There's another really great comment that really conceptualizes, I think, really well, and it's Shantaif, and I apologize if I haven't said your name correctly. To me, meaningful inclusion means respectfully integrating Indigenous knowledge systems, engaging elders and community leaders, and ensuring guidelines reflect cultural context and community priorities alongside scientific evidence. I think that says it and captures it very beautifully. I'm not sure, Raul, if you'd like to translate that.
Of course. Para Shanti Azokan, ella dice que para ella la inclusión significativa quiere decir integrar de forma respetuosa los sistemas de conocimiento indígena, comprometiendo a las comunidades y a los ancianos, a los líderes ancianos, y asegurar que las guías reflejen el contexto cultural y las prioridades comunitarias junto con la evidencia científica.
Thank you, Raul. And I'm seeing that there's 5 hearts and some thumbs up with that as well. So more support for that. I do not see any hands raised, and I'm just curious if I've missed anyone. Oh, Glenda has a comment. What about allies? You know, a question mark about good. Maybe Glenda, perhaps you want to maybe tell me a little more what you mean about allies, like in what context? I'd like to hear more about that.
There, just a second. I have the lived experience of working for an Indigenous group, and as an ally, and I always felt like the Indigenous people I worked for would prefer that I was Indigenous. I was from their background. So I don't know what the protocol is for being an ally, and is that a good thing to have them involved with setting up guidelines for a community that you're an ally of, but you aren't necessarily from that community.
Thank you for elaborating on Glenda. And I think it could go a couple of ways. One way could be in these guideline developments. It could clearly outline the role for our allies. You know, how could they help uplift and support these initiatives? Certainly. And we certainly would and will have allies who are part of developing these guidelines, because we're looking at people who develop policy and researchers. So there'll be a blending of that. But thank you for bringing that to the forefront, Glenda. Appreciate it.
And Dr. Graham, if I may remind the group, Daniela, I think, explained, and maybe you too, there are 2 aspects to the working group. It's the working group, and then is the smaller group that actually makes the final decisions and sets the tone, and they are not allies. They are all Indigenous people. So I think that may help also clarify how it will work within this Guideline International Network Working Group. Did I get it right, Daniela and Dr. Graham?
Yes, from our end, yeah.
And I think even if you look at the composition of this current partnership with Jin and RNAO and myself, and with Tecumseh and here, it's representative of working together collaboratively and understanding and knowing that we all have different worldviews and perspectives. And so that will inform how we work with the committee and how we move forward with being very cognizant of that, of our differences, but yet ultimately health is wealth, and how do we work towards helping our relatives attain that, globally. So thank you. That was a really good comment, Glenda. So thank you for sparking that conversation. I'm not seeing any other comments specifically to this. So I think we can move to the next question. It's just really, what type of principles do you suggest or that you have used that you think would be helpful with guiding respectful and reciprocal, probably trauma-informed, trust-based engagement with Indigenous communities? I know in Canada we have several research methodologies, but we have principles like OCAP, we have Métis governance principles of how to engage with Métis peoples, our tri-policy guidelines by TCPS Chapter 9, which has been designed to really provide a framework for engaging with Indigenous peoples. There's a whole chapter on it. And it all talks about it's not for, it's with people, and that they co-create all processes related to any project. And that's from the beginning, the conception of the idea, right down to dissemination, how the knowledge is shared, in manners that it's shared, and most importantly, that the research or the project is relevant to them and has meaning for the community. So it's not extractive research. So those are just some of the guidelines that they move within in Canada. We also recognize that there are other guidelines that have been developed, and of course, trauma-informed principles and care are very important. But anything else that you would like to add into that would be appreciated. Thoughts or comments. So you can put it in the chat box again, or you can raise your hand. Jordy has a comment. He said, I would suggest for these points to start with a scoping review, looking for guidance for health research already available, such as OCAP, yes, from other parts of the world to make sure we're conveying all perspectives. So a scoping review, I think that's an excellent idea. One of the challenges with scoping reviews I have found is it tends to centralize Western knowledge. I've had several graduate students doing this, and you sometimes have to look to the gray literature because a lot of our practices and what we're doing has not been published or it's in progress. But I do think a scoping review would be a sound place to start, but acknowledging we'll have to get data from other sources as well. Thank you, Jordy. Do you want to translate that, Raul?
Yes, of course. So Jordi comenta y dice que él sugeriría que estos puntos, para poder comenzar con una búsqueda y una guía para esta investigación de salud, ya existen, dice, a través de cosas como el OCAP. Jordi, no sé si nos puede comentar un poco sobre OCAP para quienes no lo sabemos.
Es que creo que no es lo exacto lo que dijo la doctora Graham, te lo traduzco yo esta. Lo
Ok.
que dice Jordi es que habría que hacer scoping review con todos los puntos para metodología para desarrollar las guías. La doctora Graham explicaba que algunas perspectivas y metodologías, pero de cómo trabajar como OCAP existen, pero lo que ella encuentra
Desafiante.
desafiante, es que mucha de la metodología de scoping review es metodología del western, de gente no indígena. Y entonces es como hay que tomar no solo las metodologías de estudios sistemáticos, etcétera, que es lo conocido, sino que también en literatura se llama acá Gray, ¿cierto? Cosas que no tienen, que están publicadas de distinto modo, y que son modos tan valiosos como los systematic reviews de hacer. Y eso, Jordi, lo estuvimos conversando cuando estuvimos desarrollando la guía de paréntesis. Pon por favor tu email, porque absolutamente tenemos que tomarte a ti y a Glena y a todos los que hicieron preguntas hoy día para también, Raúl, la revisión de la guía cuando la mandemos a revisión. Dr. Graham, I translated what you said. I also said to Raúl to take note of all the people that asked these brilliant questions today, because we will benefit from them, Dr. Graham, when we do the partners review, when we are done with the draft of the guideline that you are co-chairing, not only this working group, but the life promotion suicide prevention guideline. That we actually send that, we include them in the partners review.
Wonderful.
External review.
Wonderful. I'm just looking, I don't see any additional points in the chat box. And I'm just doing a quick scan. I do not see any hands raised. So if someone has their hand raised, please go ahead and start speaking. There's another comment by Shaylin. I second trauma-informed care as guiding principles, as I've mentioned. Yes, thank you for that, Shaylin. Given the history of trauma and knowing that with colonization, that Indigenous history is very much intertwined with violence and trauma and grief and loss, in that as part of being cognizant of that, in everything that I do as a nurse and as a psychologist, I am always looking at that and integrating that into my care. So thank you for that shout of encouragement and that important reminder, Shaylin. And there's another heart there. Any other comments about that?
Dr.
Thank you.
Holly, I've received a question for Tecumseh, which I
Sure.
can read out. Tecumseh, you're available, so you're still here, yes? Okay. The
I'm
question
on.
is, from your experience as a knowledge keeper, what does respectful engagement with Indigenous communities look like during research or guideline development?
That's not a small question, of course. There's many aspects. In fact, what we're talking about here in this whole initiative that's being created is based on the understanding that we currently don't often have respectful relationships with our Indigenous communities. And that takes many different forms. This has already been highlighted, I think, by conversation today. So to really build respectful relationship is to build relationship. And there's many principles that we have, especially in our Indigenous communities, about how do we, in fact, relate to one another. Even what I shared in the opening comments, in the opening address, the Thanksgiving address, it entails within it principles of relationship and how to do so. And that is, of course, is speaking to not only relationship with people, but with the whole of creation. And so, from our Indigenous perspective, or at least what I have as teachings and have learned and continue to learn, the essence of building respectful relationships is the essence of building equality, building the mind that, in fact, enables us to see each other and everything as equal, nothing greater than and nothing less than. So to truly building then those kinds of respectful relationships requires us to develop those types of minds. I think everything that's being referred to here, again, in terms of trauma-informed care and all of these other aspects of what has happened as a result of colonization, has been created because of the different types of minds that we have. And the minds that we have, this particular the mind that is part of colonization, does not promote typically equal relationship. And that is then creates disrespect. People act in ways, and as we know, in terms of all of the outcomes of colonization, that have caused harm to Indigenous peoples, particularly worldwide, but I'd say to all people. So the essence of respect from an Indigenous worldview, and much of what I've learned from many Indigenous cultures all around the world, the essence is, again, that. How do we develop a mind, again, the Indigenous mind that we have carried? And I would suggest all of us actually had initially, we all come from Indigenous ancestries. We all come from wherever in the world we were once, had our roots in the land. And when we had that form of mind that, in fact, promoted then thinking of greater respect for all of life and all of creation. And that's the essence of its respect, and it's then forming that way of thinking that enables us to create the relationships of equality as opposed to power over. So I like to think of it in terms of the concept of not power over, but power with. So we are stronger when we when we bring our minds together, as I say, as one, and then we have that sense of equality with one another and we respect one another. Then we are in the form of mind that once again enables us to form the relationships that we seek. And so that's the essence of it for me. There's much more to it, but that's the essence of it.
If I may add, one of the teachings of Dr. Tecumseh that I learned in one of our first conversations, and you told me the story when you were with an elder and a knowledge keeper that taught you about the ant, the ant.
Yes.
And you today showed in your remarks so many beautiful pictures of other than people, persons. And I think that's the big colonization in many ways that humans have done of Mother Earth and all that is around that is having us in the terrible travels that we are today with the environment, and people continue to take away power on, take away versus live with. And you are so eloquent on that, and you were in your remarks today again. And I think, Dr. Graham, when in this work, it really is, yes, about methodologies to develop guidelines, indigenous-led, I would say, not indigenous-shared, indigenous-led guidelines. And it translates also to policy work in other areas of life that are not human lives necessarily.
I can tell that teaching if you want, Doris.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
So I'll tell you then, what Doris is referring to is, again, it's where some of the initial teachings that were shared with me from one of my elders from in our area of Ontario we refer to as Treaty 3. And that elder was Alex Skeed, and Alex and I were sitting together one day waiting for a group of young people to join, and a group of elders to join us in an Elders Youth Learning Center. And we had set up a circle of chairs with the big drum in the middle, and we were sitting, and he was talking about, we're in Lake of the Woods area, which is a beautiful area of our lands. And we're on an island, and we're looking out the windows all around, and he's pointing out that everything out there we need to live long and good lives, Creator has given to us, has gifted to us. And he was basically saying that, all we need to do is form the minds again that enable us to recognize that and accept that and utilize all of those gifts in a good way. But as he's saying that, all of a sudden he stopped in mid-sentence, and I was sitting next to him, and I looked over, and he was looking down under my chair. And as I followed his eyes, he said, look down. He said, do you see that ant? And he's pointing to an ant that's crawling into the circle towards the drum under my chair. And he says, and I said, yeah. And he says, that ant, he's my brother. And he stopped like that. And then he would say, he's my brother. He's no greater than I, and I'm no greater than him. We're brothers. And then when he said that, he said, when we can form our minds again to think that way, then we'll know how to live in peace on Mother Earth with all of creation and all the gifts that we've received to live long and good lives. So that was one of the beginnings of how I was beginning to become awoken to the fact that my mind, as being colonized in the way it has, saw the world very differently than what he understood. And I would suggest that it's clear in our languages, in our indigenous languages, that's the languages have formed from those perspectives. And I would suggest those languages all around the world are indigenous languages that form that type of thinking. So that's what I would say is common about indigenous peoples globally, that perspective and that way of thinking. So, yeah.
It's right, it's relationships, and that's really what colonization was, that disruption of the power differentials, and the relationships have changed and they have not recovered to become equal in any capacity. So thank you, Tecumseh, for sharing that beautiful story and reminding us like our circle processes and of how we sit together, where we all have equal value, equal worth, because we're all from creation, right? So thank you. And speaking and building on what Tecumseh said about relationships and establishing them, it has to be ongoing. One of the things we're going to be doing at University of Saskatchewan this June is starting an annual invitation to community. It's coming together for First Nation, Métis, Inuit mental wellness. So it's like research, learning, and care. And to have an opportunity and a way for communities to come in every year to visit us, where we host them. And we also go to community, but we have to create those opportunities. And it's not just a one time when we want to do a project. It's about those meaningful relationships that we establish and we sustain them in there. So I think that there's lots of ways we can move together and do that. And these could be exciting parts of these guidelines, some of these ideas. So thank you for sharing. I'm not sure how much of that Raul or Dr. Grinspun would like to translate of that wonderful story, or
So I
anything.
can translate the story because I have heard the story and it's stamped in my mind, both because of the learnings of indigenous peoples, also because of the tragedy that we are doing with the environment. It's so meaningful, the story. El Knowledge Keeper, que es un Knowledge Keeper de nuestro borde directivo, que sepan, para que sepan, nosotros tenemos el placer de escucharlo mucho y aprender mucho de él. I'm saying we have the pleasure of hearing you often, Tecumseh, and learning from you. La historia de él es, él estaba con una persona que le enseñaba a él, el elder que le enseñaba a él, y estaban esperando a otros elders con el drum y con el tambor grande. Y él estaba hablando, el otro señor, el otro elder le estaba diciendo que es muy importante tener la mente, volver a la mente ingenua o genuina, no ingenua, genuina, de pensar en relaciones de equidad entre personas y también con la madre tierra. Y de repente vino una hormiguita que venía caminando hacia su tambor y el señor paró, el otro, y le dijo, y paró, y Tecumseh me contó a mí que él no sabía por qué había parado. Bueno, también les cuento entre paréntesis, muchos otros quizás hubieran puesto el pie, ¿cierto? Si hubiera sido una cucaracha, pero no, este señor paró y dijo, ¿ves? Esa hormiguita chica no es más grande que yo y no es más pequeña que yo, somos iguales, somos hermanos, dijo. Y repitió después, somos hermanos. Y él dice que a eso hay que volver. Y Holly dice que en su comunidad están haciendo ahora una reunión anual acá en Canadá están tres comunidades, Inuit, Métis, First Nations, están haciendo para todo lo de salud mental, invitándolos a todos a que a formar relaciones. Y voy a agregar algo que lo voy a después traducir al inglés. En muchos de los países norteamericanos, bueno, norteamericanos, hablo de Estados Unidos y Canadá en cierto modo también, pero Estados Unidos más. Menos en Europa, creo. Son transacciones humanas, no relaciones, o transacciones con la tierra, no relaciones. Esa parte la voy a traducir de vuelta. I added a piece that I'm going to translate in English. Holly, the rest was all intact what you and Tecumseh spoke, also your aspect of the annual reunion that you're building. I was sharing that in North America, especially in the US, but to a certain extent in Canada too, more than in Europe and certainly more than in Latin America. In Latin America, it's relational. It's very transactional. It's human transactions, even with Earth, right? Extracting everything, extracting. It's a human transaction. It's not a human relationship. In a way, we need to really reinforce that both between people and between people and the environment. So that was my added thing because of the so much transactional work versus relational work. Back to you, Dr. Graham.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think it's become very commercialized, Mother Earth, as opposed to being in relationship. So I'm looking at our last question, and this is probably, not that it's the most important question, but it is really critical. How do we ensure that this working group reflects the diverse Indigenous voices locally, nationally, and internationally? And I think this will be one of the greatest challenges, and I'm so grateful and thankful for each one of you who has attended today and the insights that you've shared. But we really want your assistance in looking at how do we do this, because I recognize that one Indigenous person like I'm Cree does not speak for all Cree people, and that we have different groups, even the linguistic and cultural differences in Canada. It's very diverse. So what would be some of your suggestions or maybe some pearls of wisdoms that you have learned in your past processes? What would be some things, concepts that we could use to really gather this? We've talked about this working group, that it's diverse with living experience, that it's people who work in communities, policymakers, researchers. What would be a way to do that? And I think keeping in mind, Dr. Grinspun and Danielle talked about there'll be this larger group and then a smaller group within this working group. So there is that flexibility with the larger group of having more people. So do you think we should go by countries and say invite every country of Jan's contacts, in terms of each country, make sure there's two delegates, a person and a knowledge keeper, or what would you suggest? And I'm looking to see if anyone have any hands up. And while I'm looking, perhaps, Raul, would you translate that last question?
Yes, of course, we put it in here in the chat already, and it says, ¿cómo podemos garantizar que este grupo de trabajo refleje voces indígenas diversas a nivel local, nacional e internacional?
Thank you, Raul.
I have a question that's been sent for Jin and for RNAO. How do you envision supporting a global network that includes many diverse Indigenous communities, all with different histories and knowledge systems?
Daniela, you want to take it first and I go next, or what's your?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. We of course recognize that Indigenous people are not a single homogeneous group. They represent different cultures and languages and governance structures and knowledge systems shaped by history and lived experience. So the GIN Indigenous Communities Working Groups will be guided by the voices and priorities from within the Indigenous communities themselves. We have the steering group, and they will guide us there. Our role from GIN's perspective is to create a respectful and enabling space to share, be heard, be valued, and we will facilitate connection between the different working groups. We talked about this earlier, provide infrastructure such as these meetings, and link to the broader global guidelines communities. That's where we see our contribution to this working group.
And to add to that, so I will be the vice chair with Dr. Graham and both Daniela, Dr. Graham and I, and also Tecumseh, were very, very clear that we need, it's a must that we capture the different perspectives, not necessarily each individual perspective in terms of ABC, but that the methodology that at the end is recommended by GIN as a methodology to develop guidelines, because that's what we are doing. We're not doing a guideline, but we are developing the methodology to the best of our knowledge. Be a methodology that can be applied or adapted, not necessarily adopted, I would say, Daniela, but adapted to different indigenous communities anywhere in the world. And this is why it's so important that those of you that spoke from different countries today, at least 3 or 4 countries today that spoke, not only Canada, that you be involved. That's why I keep putting, and again I will put, the link for you to join the working group. So if I can a bit share about the process, so people will apply. So first of all, there is the group that will lead this, that is all indigenous, but then there is the working group at large. We will be meeting between GIN and RNAO and Dr. Graham and Tecumseh to do a selection for the working group. So in doing that selection, we absolutely will make every effort to include people that bring different world perspectives in their experience and expertise in working with indigenous peoples. And on that, I think was Glenda that spoke, I believe, at one point and said you are an ally. And you know, people wish that you were indigenous. Well, you cannot be what you are not. And your perspective in that larger group will be important because you are working with indigenous communities. So you have that experience, right? It's different than someone that has the lived and living experience of being indigenous and suffering the injustices of colonization. So we will do our very, very best to include all the different perspectives of indigenous peoples in as many places as they will apply. And then in the indigenous, in the smaller group that will really make the decisions that are only indigenous people, in that group, someone like Glenda will not be there. It will only be indigenous people still with different perspectives. And Dr. Graham, please add if you think different, or Tecumseh also. Tecumseh one time said in a meeting that I was, when I asked a question, he said something really important. The more we say it's only for this, we are excluding that. So this is, I think, a motto that we should keep in mind, right? Yes, of course, in Canada is Inuit, Métis, and First Nations, but in another country, as Veronica knows, Verita, I think, is Mapuche, and is others, and in Peru is others, and Cameroon is others, and etc. They were mentioned today. So so it's really about the principles of how to work, is the relationships, and it's also what Dr. Graham spoke about, not just being guided by systematic reviews, because knowledge comes from epistemology, comes from different ways of expressing it. I will leave it to Dr. Graham to build on that. I'm sure she will, and she's guiding this working group, and also to Tecumseh. Tecumseh, from your experience, please.
Tecumseh, go ahead.
So I'm going to leave it to you, Holly, because I have comments that I'm going to make. I've been listening throughout, of course, and making notes for our closing. And much of what I think I'll speak to is what in closing will address this question. So I'll hold off until then and leave it to you. I'm not sure if you're hearing the noise in my background. If you are, I'm going to shut off my mic because I got lots of noise here right now.
We don't hear the noise, so don't worry, Tecumseh. We don't.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. That will definitely be a challenge, as mentioned in the chat box by Glenda, is that we do have diversity with the 3 groups that are recognized in our Constitution as being Indigenous, and other countries will have similar diversity. So we will be doing our best job possible in terms of selecting people that can be reflective globally. And just to reiterate some of what Dr. Grinspun said, it'll be principles, because it'll be principles of protocol, say making sure that you are following the protocol guided by the elders from that nation or that community. So it will be those types of guidelines, because we cannot possibly, because even in Canada, our protocol is different for our First Nation elders versus the Métis, and then they're different in every province and every geography. So there's so much diversity even with Canada. So that will be a part of what guides this work, is how do we collectively come together as Indigenous peoples so that we can provide a framework for non-Indigenous peoples and for people who are making policy about our health and wealth, that we're included, that we have a voice, and that they know how to engage us, and they know something about protocol, and that they certainly understand the history of colonization, how it's been devastating, and that it is even more devastating for those who live with those unpalatable health disparities and are lived and living with it. So thank you so much for sharing those very thoughtful comments and for sharing some of your reflections. And I think that it's given us, a platform in which to kind of, when we look at selection of the committee, and again, to reinforce each and every one of you to share this information with others, apply yourself to be a part of it, that would be also very much encouraged. So those were the questions that we wanted to get through. And thank you for being so patient. I know we've been sitting here for a while. It's been very engaging, and I have much gratitude for those of you who've shared your thoughts to enrich and make this as wholesome as possible, this whole process. So I'm going to turn it back over. We have a few kind of comments. I think Daniela is going to talk a little bit about joining, and then we have some closing remarks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Graham, and thank you so much for such a rich and meaningful session full of sharing and insights and learning. I think the future of this working group looks bright, which is great. As we are wrapping up, just a reminder again, if you want to join the working group, this is the QR code to do so, and the link to the page where you find more information. As we are wrapping up, we have now the opportunity for closing remarks from our speakers, and to share one word that comes to mind for you, Doris, Holly, and Tecumseh, that describes your feelings about the Indigenous Communities Working Group. Doris, do you want to make a start?
Very easy. Inspired. Not only by the colleagues, you and Dr. Graham and Tecumseh, who always inspire me, but I have heard you and I speak with you often by the participants. I am just inspired by the level of participation, by the thoughtfulness of comments. I'm just, I like you, Daniela, not only promising, we will deliver in spades. And Dr. Graham, I think you have an important job, not a challenging one, an important job. And so does Tecumseh in continuing to guide us and us respecting your guidance. Thank you. Now and Chimigwich.
Thank you. And in closing, I want to say I do see this as a step towards reconciliation in terms of how do we make and create a better future for us who are still living, but also for our future generations, and some would say for 7 generations. So I see this as a very positive step, an incredible opportunity to have a voice in development of guidelines that has never yet been done. So I see this as such an exciting, journey and adventure that we get to go on together and learn about each other and share and grow to each other. So I'm really excited to do this work with Jin and RNAO. And for those of you who will be a part of that group, I certainly look forward to further conversation and hearing, I guess, your experiences and how we can collectively put this together, this past of this truth that in some degree has been very similar for Indigenous peoples globally, and bring together a document that has imbued with spirit and has life and has hope in a way that we can improve health and wealth for all our relatives. Hi.
Holly, Dr. Graham, before Tecumseh takes over, I want to remind you that Raul has a word cloud, so people should not leave. Daniela, after Dr. Tecumseh does his closing remarks, make sure that people don't leave. And one more thing I do want to say, everybody has been enjoying the artwork, but no one knows of the artist. I do want to mention that Maxine Lesage was the creator of the I think, approach toolkit for best practice spotlight organizations, knowledge mobilization, and the creator behind this artwork, the artist though, her name is Grace Swain, and I believe that that's in the Gene website. It certainly also is in the RNAO website. And Grace Suba, if you don't mind putting the link, that will be really good because it's fantastic. The story written about it is just beautiful. It will be stamped in your mind like the story of the ant that Dr. Tecumseh just mentioned. Back to you.
You're passing it to me, Doris? Okay, so I just need clarification. Do you want me just, Daniela, to just give my comment with regards to our meeting today and then wait for my closing after you give your words?
No, if you could give your closing comments and contribution now, and then I just wrap up and we close the session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so lots of words and lots of thoughts. Yeah, so my main word, if I give you wanting one word, and those who know me know that I usually don't give just one word, but I will give one word and then I will give my closing remarks. And my one word is hopeful. And hopeful for me stands for the potential and possibility that this type of gathering and dialogue that we're inviting people to join into represents for me. As Holly has mentioned, we have had in Canada the experience of what we call a process of truth reconciliation. And so the Truth and Reconciliation Commission ultimately then produce the guideline or the numbers of different things that need to happen to build reconciliation in Canada with Indigenous populations. So reconciliation is a word. And I see this as more hopeful than just simply reconciliation, because I believe what it really requires to actually enact reconciliation is that we have to have reconciliation. And action is putting thoughts into action. And so I would say the potential for this dialogue on a much larger scale, on a global scale, has the potential to begin to, we talk often in Canada about a concept of decolonization. Some people don't like that because it doesn't capture really what we're thinking of, I think, from an Indigenous worldview. I think we're talking about building good relationship again, reforming good relationship. In North America with colonization, as we saw, and I know and I've studied colonization all around the world, the initial stages of colonization often were friendly. They were built on relationship and then devolved into what became then what I would say is the enactment of a different form of thinking, a different mind. And that mind was the mind that in fact was formed over many, many periods of time in our human history that moved us from an Indigenous mind to then what we would call non-Indigenous mind, or that of the thinking of colonizers and colonization. So I've described it again and has come to understand it as being, in essence, I often speak of two minds, two worldviews. And so and I understand that fairly well from experience, from lived experience, because I've been gifted, I would suggest, with two minds. The mind of, my father's ancestry was Irish, and that side of the family is from Ireland. I relate to my Irish ancestry with my Celtic ancestry, because those were the Indigenous people of the roots of our people in Ireland. Any of those who live in that part of the country, of the part of the lands of the globe, understand that early stages of perhaps of colonization. So yes, I'd say what we're trying to do is to rebuild our minds in terms of more of Indigenous minds that enabled us to think in the ways that I've described in the teaching or the story that we shared with you of the ant. So I'm sitting here now, and interestingly enough, in Mexico, and I'm surrounded by the beautiful Spanish language, right? But yet there's that distance of communication and connecting with one another. I'm even, as I sit here and listen with you and share with you, on the one side I can hear, and I mentioned the noise, they're doing all kinds of construction around me right now. And on the other side of me, I have a table outside that I put the smudge, when I offered a smudge to open our gathering today with the medicines that we use for opening and purifying and opening our gatherings. So I lit that and I put it out on the table. And while I'm sitting here, two big birds landed right on the table and are looking at and investigating that medicine. So almost representing for me, again, the understanding of two worldviews, two ways of knowing, two ways of thinking, two ways of understanding. I listened to all of what we've shared here, and I was so impressed by the attention to respect the building of relationships as we were gathering here today, because our languages are different, right? And we paid attention to that, and you translated and spoke in both languages, English and Spanish, right? In order to make sure that we respected the ways of knowing and thinking of all of our people who have gathered here with us. There may be others with other languages too. I know that some are here that we didn't recognize and respect. So it's important going forward, I think, if we're going to be successful in this endeavor, to recognize, those differences of particularly language, because the languages, again, especially when we come to the Indigenous languages, as I've learned from our elders and our healers and our medicine people, not just in Canada, but in other parts of the globe, that most of the people who are the true healers and medicine people from our different nations, from all over the world globally, their language is their first language, which is their Indigenous language. And some of them don't even speak English or any other language, any other colonizer's language. So we're going to have to attend, if we really want them to be involved, to respect their knowledge and their ways of communicating. And we're going to need to ensure we have translators to do that for them, to invite them in, and that's how we build the relationships. As I close with my thoughts about this, I draw your attention again to an image that I shared with you when we began. In those words that I shared, at one point in time, you saw me and you heard me reference Mother Earth. And you saw the image of Mother Earth from space. One of my other elders, before he passed away, gifted me with a picture that I have that I share out in other teachings. If we gather it like this again, I may have it to share with you. But it was an image, it's a picture that he gifted to me before he passed, before the time that we spent together. And he was really giving thanks to me. I was so thankful that he gave me that time at the end of his life to share with me. But he was giving me a gift because I listened and because I was present with him and because I wanted to know. And so he gave me this gift of this picture that is a child that's sitting on like a cloud with the back of the scape of the night sky, with this globe that's like the kind of globe that you see that we teach with, right? And that globe is sitting over just beside the child, and the child has a string, a red string that it's holding. And that child, you can imagine now, if you see the globe pulling on that string, and the string that the child is pulling from is actually borders that are created particularly from the globe in South America, dividing all the countries, right? But that's not the image, of course, that we see, and that we know that those who've gone into space now and look back on Mother Earth, they see her as she was created. She was created without any divisions. But historically in time, we've divided ourselves by languages, and we've divided ourselves, by putting these lines all over Mother Earth. So what's hopeful to me is the bigger picture that this potentially presents, is the picture of Mother Earth as she is. As astronauts now have the privilege and the gift to be able to see her. And if you listen and you read anything that they say about their experiences, they actually, most of them speak to it as a spiritual experience. They speak to it as feeling that they all of a sudden have understood something that they couldn't understand when they didn't see Mother Earth as she is meant to be. So even in this effort here, to me, it's much bigger even than what we have spoken of here. It has potential, and I say hopeful potential, for us to come to trace back to what we need to know in order to live as we're meant to be, I believe. However our teachings are, whatever you understand and however you understand Creator and creation, I think our teachings all point to we were meant to live in peace on Mother Earth and with all of creation. So those are my thoughts. I would say, by the way, that we may be moving into an era where we can start to breach those divisions, because AI might also, I've actually had opportunities more recently where we can get AI translation simultaneously to begin to be able to relate and speak with one another at the same time. So, yes, that comes from that other world. There's two worldviews. Now, Nyawa.
Thank you very much, Tecumseh, for your closing words. I think we leave this slide on because we have this wonderful word cloud here. We shared reminders on the links for the working group and the upcoming meeting. I would like to thank all our speakers, our colleagues at the RNAO and my colleagues at the GIN team who made this webinar possible. And last but not least, thanks to all our participants for joining us today and staying until the end, which is very much appreciated. We're grateful for your time and your contribution to this important global initiative. We hope you will be able to join the Guidelines International Network Indigenous Communities Working Group, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you, take care, stay well, and goodbye.